You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and today we have another special guest. Today we're going to be talking to Tedi Brunetti, and man, you talking about singer, songwriter, drummer from Pittsburgh, stand-up Pittsburgh, black and yellow. When it comes to all the music, all the influences, we're going to learn about her story, her amazing story, her music career. But before we dive too deep into her story with her music, let's learn more about Tedi. Tedi, welcome to the show, and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Shamika. Thanks for having me. Well, I'm a grandma, and I live in Pittsburgh, and this is my second time around with a music career. I had a band in New York City in the 70s and 80s. I got to play with some touring recording acts, and got to record a lot in big studios, and I played that New York City scene, CBGBs and all the clubs, and was part of that starving artist community in New York City back in the 70s and 80s. It was a very exciting time to be in New York. And then we had a couple kids. My husband's my partner in life and my partner in my music also. He's my lead guitar player. And we had our two sons, and New York got a little cost prohibitive. And we came back to Pittsburgh, which is our hometown. So the kids would know their grandparents and their cousins. I'm from a big Italian family. I'm the oldest of 10 kids. So I lived my life in stages. So I had the time to myself in New York where I pursued my own interests. Then we had the kids, and to us, it was about the kids. So we came back. I went back to school for ultrasound, believe it or not. I've done the yin and yang of sound. And I performed echocardiograms and vascular ultrasound for 20 years. And that was kind of tough on my arms, so I couldn't play drums while I did that because I was, who needs their heart tested? It's the 300-pound people. So pushing on those big 300-pounders all day long. I got severe tendonitis in my elbow, so I couldn't really play drums too. So I did that, and then about 8 years ago, I was able to retire from that career and started playing again. And the next thing you know, put a little band together, started writing once again, and ran into my old producer who produced my first solo album in New York, Dean Sargent, and his partner, Michael Hennigan. And I said, you know what, I'm thinking of recording again. And he said, let's do it. So here I am today. I have an album coming out in July. We just dropped the first single, Evil Woman, and the video. I have a wonderful video production team also. And it's kind of exciting. I'm living my retirement dream.
So once again, talking to Tedi Brunetti and her amazing music career right here on I Am Refocused Radio. And you talked about the family, and I always like talking about family on the show, and it sounds like you have a big family. Did any of y'all make the Godfather movie? That's just a joke. That's a joke. But with that said, what inspired you to get into music? Like, what was some of the types of music that drew you in, that said, I can do this. I want to get into this. I have a strong taste to get inside this industry.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things that I was just called to on a I believe a spiritual level. I was young. I was like 11 years old, and I was at a girlfriend's birthday party, and she had an older sister who was about 14, who had a little pink Victrola record player. We spun 45s back in those days. There was no iTunes. So, they put this record on. It was Louie Louie by the Kingsmen. I was across the room and the song came on, and the drums on that song are bombastic. Okay, the next time you hear it, is a big hit. The next time you hear that song, you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll go, oh yeah. And something happened to me. It was like I got shot through with electricity, lightning, whatever it was. I was possessed. I ran to that record player, stood in front of it, and I just kept playing that song over and over again. And in my heart of hearts, in the deepest part of my soul, I knew right then and there, this is what you do. You play the drums. You can be a drummer. You're a musician. You're going to do music. And I'd never played an instrument in my life up until that point. But I knew I could do it. I said, I was just possessed. And I went home and asked to take drum lessons, and my parents said no because they thought drums was a boy's instrument. So I asked for the next best thing, which was guitar. And, God had a plan for me because that's how I write my music, on guitar. So guitar was my first instrument. I did well with it. They bought me a guitar. And then I had a job after school, and I took my money and went to the mall and signed myself up for drum lessons. And then here I am today. And I ended up getting a scholarship for snare drumming in college. I went to college for a couple of years as a music major, dropped out, and went on the road with a rock band. So,
and that's interesting. You're talking about wanting to play drums, and parents was at first not feeling that, and they end up playing a different instrument. It's funny you say that because I remember I joined the band. I wanted to be a drummer. I wanted to be in percussionist, but let's just say that was the most popular choice, and it filled up like a snap of a finger, and I ended up playing the trumpet. Yeah. So with
always a lot of drummers, huh?
Right. And that's the thing, like drums is the heartbeat of the song. So don't let me get started on that.
Yeah. And as far as style of music goes, my best friend, I started writing songs as soon as I started playing that guitar, by the way. So I've been writing songs since I was 11, 12 years old. And I studied songwriting in New York when I was there at ASCAP and the Songwriters Guild. So I pride myself on my songwriting also. And anyway, my girlfriend, I would write songs about the kids in the class and stuff that was going on. And we were like the first rock band girls of the school. And we'd go to all the little parties and play our songs, But my girlfriend Diane Farrell is her name now, she turned me on to Whammo, which is the black station here in Pittsburgh, and especially back in those days. And so she turned me on. She was a big fan. She had an older sister too, who was a little bit further ahead of us as far as pop culture of the day. But we listened to James Brown, and we loved James Brown, and I loved that black station, and I loved, of course, all the Motown people. A big influence on me, and because of the beat, right? James Brown has some really good drummers, really good. So what a rhythm section, So yeah, that's part of my upbringing in music,
And once again, listen to I Am Refocus Radio, talking to Tedi Brunetti, and I like how your first and last name rhymes. That's really cool. I mean,
and it's my maiden name. I'm named after my father. And the strange thing is, like I said, I'm the oldest of 10 kids. I have a brother who's 10 years younger than me, and his name's Tedi Brunetti. And he's in show business too. He was Frankie Coffee Cake in A Bronx Tale on Broadway a few years back. He's a writer, producer, actor, director. And so that gets a little weird, the older we get now, when we're introducing each other to our friends. And it's like George Foreman, how he named all his kids George, even the girls are named George. I feel their pain.
Well, you did. You
Pardon
mentioned your single, and we also want to talk about this amazing project that's coming out in July, later in July 20th. Queen of Pittsburgh. Now we got to get the story of that title and what's some of the cool things you're having in store for the listeners.
Well, here's the thing about that title. It wasn't my title. I write from titles, by the way. This was my producer, Dino's, Dean Sargent. Dino and I wrote that song together, but he instigated it. Dean Sargent and Mike Hennigan, my producers, they were coming to Pittsburgh. We were doing pre-production, trying to get material together. And I live in a beautiful loft in the downtown of Pittsburgh. I have a wonderful city view, the whole landscape of all the buildings in Pittsburgh, and it lights up at night, and it's just gorgeous. And I love Pittsburgh. My husband and I love Pittsburgh. So we took them on the tour of the city and everything. And on his way home in the car, he lives in the Poconos. These guys are from the Poconos. They're like 6 hours away. So on their drive back home, he calls me and he says, okay, I have this idea for a song. It's called Queen of Pittsburgh. And I thought, oh man, there's going to be some people hating on that. I don't know. I'm like, He's like, well, see if you can do anything with it. And he gave me a couple lines, and he had like the words to the first verse and the first chorus. And people don't the song is, I'm not saying I'm the Queen of Pittsburgh in the song. The line in the song is, I'm not going to stop kicking ass until they make me the Queen of Pittsburgh. So that's what the song's about. But, nobody knows that yet because it hasn't been released. So that's going to come out in July 20th. And it's a great song. And one of the things about that song also, I talk about the city in it, about, the history of the city, how the steel mills left and how we're into technology now and things like that. So it speaks about Pittsburgh. And one of the things that's special to me about the production of the song is that there's a father-son guitar solo in it. Our younger son, James, he's named after my husband, Jim. There's a Jim and James guitar solo section where my husband plays the first half of the guitar solo, and he's like the master of this lyrical, iconic guitar line, kind of playing like Carlos Santana style. And then my son comes in with this wicked, wild, crazy wah-wah guitar solo and takes it out. And it's, that's one of the special things I got to do on this album. And I have a couple of my sisters sing background vocals on a few of the songs too. And that's something I always, in the years when I wasn't doing music, I always thought if I ever do an album, I would really like to have some of my sisters on it singing. And I'd really like to use James, our son, because he plays guitar, bass, and drums. He has a band, Sweet Earth, and they're a jam band, and they're excellent. But what a treat to have your husband and your son on your record with you. Yeah. And so I get a lot of joy out of that, and every time I hear my sisters singing, that's a treat too. Because I had one of my brother Joseph Brunetti. He sang background. He was one of my background singers in New York City with that band. So,
Yeah, and
it's beautiful to work with people who are that close to you,
And to have your family be a part of your just music story and just history. I have to ask this question. How did you and your husband start creating music together? Like, was there an audition, or was it something that just happened, like just boom, got in the studio, started making songs?
Well, I met him through an ad in the newspaper back in the day. He had a partner and they were on the road, and the ad said female singer and or musician. and I auditioned. And actually, that first band that I was in with him on the road, I was the bass player. I wasn't the drummer. And then as we got to know each other, drums was my thing. So, yeah, and so he learned pretty early on that I wrote songs and that I sang. So, and that was always my dream, to go to New York and try to make it in the music business. To go to New York or LA or one of the big cities like that where the music business was centered back in those days. So we're from Pittsburgh, so New York's closer, so it made more sense to go to New York. And actually, my parents were actors, and when they first got together, they went to New York and tried to make it as actors. So I had this little romantic thing about New York in my mind, So that's what we did.
And you did touring too. You did touring with New York City's the Impalas. You did Toronto's and famous Big Girls. And
right.
And tell us about that, because the music industry, everyone always wants to know the secret sauce. So it's my job to try to take everything out of you for people to have a blueprint. So what's your secret sauce of the success you obtained being able to tour and do this professionally?
Yeah, I got lucky. The first thing I did that was a big tour kind of thing, New York based act, was Eloise Laws, and her brother Hubert Laws is a jazz flautist, and he's a musician's musician. He doesn't just play jazz. He's the kind of guy who he won the Downbeat flautist award, flute award every year, like for years and years, and he still might be winning it. I don't know. I haven't kept up with it, but he can play Montreux Jazz Festival one week and with the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra the next week. I mean, he's that kind of a musician. And then her brother, maybe you've heard of him, Ronnie Laws, is a sax player, and he had quite a few pop albums in the 70s and 80s, like the disco era and stuff. And he's a soft jazz kind of guy, saxophone player. So she had quite a pedigree, and she did Johnny Carson show and things like that. We had the same manager, and he knew I went to college, so he knew I could read music, and she wanted a rock drummer. She didn't want a show band drummer. And we picked up a big band when we were on the road. She carried a guitar player, bass player, and the bass player was her conductor, background singers, and a drummer. So I was the drummer. So I read charts and toured with her, and that was the first big thing I did. I had to move to New York and do rehearsals and all that, and then we toured. And then after that, when I got married and moved back to New York more on a permanent basis with my husband, the first band we got into there was the Impalas, and that was with Joe Speedo Frazier, and they had a song, "Sorry, I Ran All the Way Home Just to Say I'm Sorry." That was one of the first million-selling singles ever, and he was on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Joe was such a sweet, sweet, sweet man, and what a beautiful soul he was. He passed away. He has passed away since, but he was 16 years old when he was on the Ed Sullivan Show, and and he was a black man, and when he would show up, he would tell us when he was on tour originally, they'd show up and everyone was shocked because he was black. No one knew, from the record, he didn't sound black, I guess, on that song. So, but what a fine person he was. So that was kind of a neat thing and a way to get initiated in New York City. So, and then back then in those days, you could go to the clubs and hang out with the musicians, and everybody got to know each other, and everybody supported each other, and word would get around. They had rehearsal studios, and you'd meet people there, and it was quite a community. And we lived in a building called the Music Building. It was pretty iconic. It was like 14 floors of musicians. And so our living room the band was set up in the living room. Okay, you could play there like 24/7. It was quite a place, and boy, everybody in the music business was in and out of there. John Lennon's band, one of his bands, they were on the same floor as us. Harry Belafonte had a place in that building. I mean, the Ramones were in there. I mean, it was quite a place. It was a beehive of musicians, you know.
Once again, been talking to Tedi Brunetti right here on Iron Refocus Radio, and that's pretty awesome to like the way you've been describing the whole, because it's like watching a movie in my head, and that's when you know it's some good stories because you can visualize it in your head. For the audience, for that listener listening in who maybe they're aspiring music artist or songwriter or musician, based on your history and your experience inside the music industry and knowing the ins and outs of the business versus not just treating this as a hobby, but actually a career. Mm-hmm. What would you say to someone who says, you know what, I want to do this one day and do this professionally? What are some of the things that just generally they should keep in mind before they just make that jump?
Well, it's a tough business, and not just because of the numbers of people trying to do it, but it's a lot of disappointment, you know, as well, you know. So know that going into it, and be true to yourself, and do what you want to do for yourself. If it isn't, let your music speak for itself. You know, that's been the way I focus on it. Then if you're happy with it, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or however many streams you get or fans you get at your shows, you know. Because the thing I think people are the most attracted to is when somebody's authentic. And so find what you are, find who you are, and express that, whatever genre, whatever type of music. I like everything myself. Anything that's done well and done with feeling, and you know, I respect it. So I listen to all kinds of music and art, because to me that's art, right? When you're really expressing your soul as an individual. So and that's what I love about recording. It's permanent, and that's what I really enjoy is recording. To me, it's like carving a statue. At the end, you have something that that'll stand up to the test of time, and it'll be there, and future generations can enjoy it. And that's one of the reasons why we did this album. The original premise was we were going to make a recording so our grandkids would know we were cool once. You know.
And speaking of, you mentioned earlier about in the industry, there's disappointments, and whether it's the music industry or whatever career path you're in or life in general, there's always going to be disappointments along the way. Before we let you go, how did you manage to overcome those disappointments and still pursue your passion and still keep going no matter what?
Well, it's not always easy. It's heartbreaking sometimes, especially when if it gets financially to the point where the music career isn't supporting you, you know. And that's kind of what happened to us in New York. And we had done everything you could do but have a hit record. And then we had the children, and we had to make a decision, you know. And so, like I said, I lived my life in stages, so I got out of it for a while, even though I always felt I was a musician, you know. And I was, and I am. it's, I have a spiritual life. So I do believe that I have a higher purpose, and being a musician is part of that. And, it's funny. Once I won a snare drum in a raffle kind of contest that a music store in New York was having. You sent a coupon in every week. 1 week they give away a microphone, 1 week they give away a guitar, and 1 week they gave away a snare drum. And I had one of these come to Jesus moments where I was like, I don't know, should I stay in New York and be a musician, or should I go back to Pittsburgh and make babies? What should I do? And I was crying out to God, I need a sign, I need something. And wouldn't you know it, the next day I got a phone call, but I had won the snare drum. So to me, that was my sign that I should have been a musician, at that point. I trust my gut.
Yeah.
And I know in my heart that when something's right and when something's wrong for me. And so now I've just come to accept it after all these years, But it's... and I have the love of a lot of people around me who support me and who want me to do my music. So that's a blessing.
Well, once again, true honor. And everyone always says the worst part of the interview is when you have to say goodbye. But it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. If you want to learn more about Tedi Brunetti, just go to tedibrunetti.com. Again, that's tedibrunetti.com. I want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for talking to I Am Refocus Radio today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Reed. You're a gentleman, and I had so much fun talking with you.
And like we say on every single show, keep God first, stay focused, and peace. Hey, it's Shamai Reed with I Am Refocus Radio. Make sure you go to IamRefocusRadio.com to listen to today's episode. Once again, like we always say, keep God first, stay focused, and peace.